This is Cashflow Ninja, episode 227 with Dr. Ron Paul.
Welcome to the Cashflow Ninja, the podcast sharing how to create income streams and manage, multiply, and protect your wealth in the new economy. Here is your host inside the dojo, MC Laubscher.
Hello, Cashflow Ninjas. MC Laubscher here, and welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Ninja. I have a great show for you today, and in today's show, we're going to look at why the current monetary system is unsustainable. I'm honored to have as my guest in today's episode, former Congressman, presidential candidate, Dr. Ron Paul. Dr. Ron Paul has been a champion of liberty, helping people to start questioning the role of government, how a free society functions, the imperialistic foreign military adventures over the last 2 decades, and what money is and what it should be by exposing the true nature of the Federal Reserve. Some of my personal favorite moments in politics have been watching Congressman Dr. Ron Paul grilling the Federal Reserve Chairman, Ben Bernanke, and other banking cronies on Capitol Hill after the financial crisis. A 12-term congressman from Texas, he has been the leading advocate of freedom in our nation's capital. He has devoted his political career to the defense of individual liberty, sound money, and non-interventionist foreign policy. Judge Andrew Napolitano calls him the Thomas Jefferson of our day. After serving as a flight surgeon in the U.S. Air Force in the 1960s, Dr. Paul moved to Texas to begin a civilian medical practice, delivering over 4,000 babies in his career as an obstetrician. He served in Congress from 1976 to 1984 and again from 1996 to 2012. Ron Paul, the New York Post once wrote, is a politician who cannot be bought by special interests. There are very few people in public life who through thick and thin, rain or shine, stick to their principles, added a congressional colleague. Ron Paul is one of those few. Please share your feedback and thoughts on today's interview. You can let me know your thoughts on Twitter by tweeting me at MC Laubscher or by email at info@cashflowninja.com. And please remember to join our mailing list by signing up at cashflowninja.com or texting Cashflow Ninja to 44222. To ensure you never miss one of our episodes, you can download our free interactive smartphone apps on the Apple and Google Play app stores. I've also created a Cashflow Ninja investment group where I share opportunities that I'm investing in with my fellow investors. If you're interested in joining this group, please email me at info@cashflowninja.com and we will continue the conversation to see if you're a good fit for our group. I've always thought that if there's only a handful of people that have built indestructible wealth in any economy and any market, why are we following the advice and doing what the majority of people are doing that are struggling financially? My friend Dave Zook says you can be conventional or you can be wealthy, but you need to pick one. At The Real Asset Investor, Dave and his company create value for investors looking for higher yield returns from real estate ventures domestically and internationally. To learn more about this exciting investment opportunities The Real Asset Investor offers, such as the syndication opportunity at Mahogany Bay Village in Belize, investment opportunities in the multifamily space in the United States, and ATM syndication opportunities, please visit cashflowninja.com/real asset investor. Have you read Rich Dad Poor Dad? Are you interested in real estate investing and don't know where to start or how to get the results you want? For valuable information to get you started, visit JoinOps Properties at joinopsproperties.com. The wealthiest investors on the planet know how to capture their wealth and leverage it to perpetually grow it. If you're interested in learning the premier strategies of the wealthiest individuals and families on the planet, you can access your free webinar at cashflowninja.com/be the bank. Dr. Paul, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great deal to be with you today.
Fantastic. Very excited to have you on. And you've had quite a journey as a young man, and you attended medical school and earned a Doctor of Medicine degree from Duke University School of Medicine. And then you worked in medicine in your private practice for years, delivering a very large sum of babies. And you've also had served as a flight surgeon in the United States Air Force, and then also later joined the Air Force National Guard. And this was all before you went into politics and all the amazing things that you've done there. What are some of the biggest aha moments or red pill moments that you had on your journey with regards to personal and civil liberties, economics, the Federal Reserve, and the way that you view the world?
Well, that's hard to pick one thing because it's an ongoing process. My goal has always been to try my best to understand what a free society is all about and why liberty is important and why the marketplace can take care of our problems and why we need less government. So to me, it was always a challenge to get other people to understand what I think is important and for me to understand better those values. And I think that I probably surprised myself because I was reluctant to believe that I would be able, and still don't believe that one person can just change the whole world. But I think I was sort of surprised, but in a pleasant way, that I became noticed in politics more than I ever dreamed I would be because, it was a lonely fight. I was, fighting the Fed. And yet now today people know the Fed is a problem for us and the central bank is a problem for us and sound money is an interesting subject. So I think it's through this educational activity. And I was delighted when the individuals, especially the young people on college campuses, were responding very enthusiastically and spontaneously because evidently they had been introduced to these ideas by other libertarians and people on talk shows and different things. So I was surprised that I could participate in getting people excited about the cause of liberty. And, of course, that was in many ways directly being involved in politics as well as speaking out on college campuses.
It definitely did give you a fantastic platform, and there was a lot of energy from, especially in the millennials, during your presidential run, just understanding what it is, what the meaning is of personal freedom. Just as these cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin is asking people to ponder, well, what is money? You definitely made us ponder and wonder what is personal freedom and what is liberty and what does it truly mean? Coming back to politics, what was one of the reasons why you ever entered into the political arena? We know that this could be quite a arena that's or a swamp, as President Trump refers to it, with a lot of interesting characters. So why did you ever decide to get into politics, and what were some of the things that you saw when you entered politics that kind of really shocked or surprised you?
Well, I guess there was never a decision, I'm going into politics. It wasn't quite that way. I was very much aware of what was happening in the monetary system, having studied Austrian economics and what the consequence of the Bretton Woods Agreement would mean. And that, of course, was in 1945 when it was established. And there were predictions that this thing would fall apart and be chaotic. And, of course, that came in 1971, and these predictions came about, and it's been very messy. So I just thought at the time that I think monetary policy is important. That's the way they finance bad things. That's how they undermine our liberties and get involved in runaway welfareism and get us involved in war. So I just decided that the monetary issue was a big thing. So I didn't say, well, I'm going into politics and change all this. There was a big vacuum there. This was, 71 was when this thing came about. But in 1973, there was some political activity in my district. And I thought, well, nobody wants to be a Republican. The Watergate activity was, involved. 74 was the first election I was involved in. And nobody wanted to be a Republican. There were only 3 congressmen in Texas that were Republicans. So there was a vacuum, and it was just filling that vacuum for me to go out and talk about something I wanted to talk about. And I kid about it, but it was true that I told my wife, I'm going to run for Congress. And she says, what are you going to do that for? I said, well, I want to talk about, the affairs of our country. She says, oh, no, but it's so dangerous. You have this medical practice. She says, it's so dangerous. You might even get elected. And I assured her that would be impossible because I'm not into this thing. So that was a surprise for me, to get into politics. And it really started then. And But her saying back then is, she said, you'll be credible and they're going to believe you, and they looking for somebody to believe. Even back in the 70s, there was a lot of disbelief, and I think that's worse today than ever. But fortunately, the people right now are waking up and they don't believe what the government's telling them and telling us, and I think that's very good. And it's also causing, a lot of distress among people, but the people know that the system we have isn't working. And I think that's to our benefit for them to recognize this, because I'm looking for the day that there is a big, big change in what we have, just as big as it was when the Soviet communist system fell apart. And I think the current system that we're in charge of, it's going to fall apart too. So I think this effort of explaining this and being involved, and so I found that politics was the vehicle that I was using. So nothing really ever surprised me when we got there. People would say, well, weren't you so disappointed and just frustrated you didn't get anything done? And I said, no, I never had this plan that I was going to go there and pass a law next year and get rid of the Federal Reserve. I was very realistic about it, and I had low expectations politically. So I did quite fine, and I was pleased with reaching as many people as I did.
And it was a platform for you to just share that message, as you mentioned, and a lot of people learned and pondered exactly how our money system works, how the global monetary system works, because as you mentioned, these folks control the purse strings, and it was quite entertaining to see a lot of red-faced folks being asked really, really tough questions on the economy and so forth, that really funds this ever-growing welfare and then a warfare state, which you spoke out, and you had a lot of courage speaking out against these wars, especially during the debates. And at that stage, there was a lot of rhetoric that even it was anti-American to be against these foreign entanglements, right?
Yeah, and back then everybody was for the wars, but now they say, well, it was your fault, and they blame each other, for getting involved in Iraq and Afghanistan. But it was very bipartisan. Everything is bipartisan in Washington, in spite of all the arguing, because they all support the deficits and the financial system and the Federal Reserve and the foreign policy. So it's not strange. They get together and they do these things, but they can't do it without the Federal Reserve, because you can tax so much, you can borrow so much, but then you still don't have enough. And when you're in the driver's seat and you can issue the reserve currency of the world, that's like being in charge of printing gold. You can get away with a lot, and we have, and that's why we've extended ourselves so greatly, and why we have such great danger, because you can't do this forever. There's eventually a correction, and the resistance to it is very strong, and the resistance actually, in a way, accomplished the total collapse in 2009, because they kept printing money and all. But that doesn't mean that our theories on monetary system, on monetary policy, and the overextension of government is wrong. It's just a matter of time that this system that can't work won't work, and we ought to be prepared for it.
The dollar dominance is definitely waning, and it's sort of exponentially in the last couple of years. The currency, as you mentioned, you touched on the Bretton Woods Agreement, and then the 1971 when Nixon shocked the world and took us off the gold standard and the world of the gold standard. So it looks like the global monetary system has made adjustments and changed a little bit every 30 to 40 years. We're very much overdue since for another change. Where do you see, are we with this? You've spoken about quite a reset, and how do you think this will play out?
Well, hopefully our side's going to win, and traditionally, and the history shows that when monetary policy gets out of hand, which it always does, in the old days, they would dilute the metal, or they would clip the coins, or they would try printing money, but now we use computers, and it's a different story. But to restore confidence, the traditional way was that you had to convince the people that you were going to quit printing, and that you would back the currency by something that would have real value. And our country has experienced that. I think one good example of how it has been done in this country was, of course, we had to do it at the beginning with the continental money, because that didn't work. But after the Civil War, we were without a gold standard from 1861 to 1878. and we had to go through a period of what they call the Restoration Act of 1875, and people believed the government, and the government backed off on printing the greenbacks, and they backed off on spending, and they cut back. And it was a sort of a non-event, but that's what's necessary. And when they did that, the people were convinced that the money was going to be good, and it would be backed by something. Today, since the trust in the government is lost, it's much more difficult. But no matter which country it's been that has destroyed their monetary system, they either have to go to metals directly or to a currency that has the benefits of having been or is a currency backed by something of real value. So yes, I think sound money, hard money, commodity money will win out because this system will fail and it'll be chaotic, and they have to restore confidence. But the toughest job and the most important job is giving up on this extravagance which has been financed by the creation of new money. And that's where they don't want to talk about it. All that fussing going on in Washington today about, taxes and how are we going to pay for all this. They don't really talk seriously about what should the role of government be? Where are we going to cut? Nobody gets cut. I mean, the president this week just asked for another $6 billion additional money for the military industrial complex. And we had a flood in Texas, so they printed another $30 billion. It's all because, for humanitarian reasons. But what if this humanitarian effort leads to a Zimbabwe or Venezuela? That's not very humanitarian, but that's sort of arguing in the long term. Nobody wants to think about the long term. They think about the immediate benefits. And so far, the immediate benefits have worked to some degree, even though there's plenty of people suffering. Right now, half the country is suffering, and that's why people are very unhappy. The standard of living for the average person in the lower income brackets, there hasn't been any increase in real wages really since the Bretton Woods broke down. And that's why there's a lot of unhappiness out there. So this will end, but I think it will have to end with restoration of the principle of sound money, and that the politicians can't just print it out of thin air.
Yeah, the inflation is definitely one of the biggest wealth destroyers, and the average family and person out on the street has definitely felt this. Another thing that's come into play is the healthcare mess that the country is in. What is your take on this, and what are some of the viable solutions?
Well, the best solution would be just following the law, and the law is the Constitution, and there's no authority for the federal government to be involved in any medical care for the people. People say, well, that's not humanitarian, but the system we have now is getting less humanitarian than ever. In the countries, I mean, what kind of medical care do they get in Zimbabwe and Venezuela and some other socialist countries? And even in this country, we have sort of a fascist system where the drug companies, insurance companies, and management companies and drug companies, all these people are making the money, and the people are getting worse care. So no, the freer the market, the better it should be. But that's, nobody's going to wave a wand and achieve that under today's circumstances. There's too many people, the people who are making profits, and some people getting free medical care. So that's not going to happen. But for those of us who would like to see a move in the right direction, Obamacare was a drastic move in the wrong direction. So I think you'd have to have some really simple thing to understand is the right to opt out, no mandates. If you and I decided that we could take care of ourselves better on our own, just get us out of the system, let us deduct all we spend on medical care from our taxes, and we won't be a tax burden to anybody. And that would be a big step, and it would be such a miraculous help for a lot of people that people would say, hey, maybe the market can deliver good medical care. Even under these terrible conditions we have today, there are some private hospitals that are resisting, and they're doing surgeries and other things for 10% of what these other hospitals are doing, and yet they only just pay cash. They don't deal with insurance or government, anybody else. And people are going there because they can provide a service. People have lost confidence in freedom. But when I started medicine, when I got my license in the early years and early 60s, there was no Medicare and no Medicaid. And people were not out in the streets. And it's all been a politically driven system for the benefits of the people who make the money off the top. And of course, those are the insurance companies and the drug companies and different people like that. They make the money and the patients suffer.
You're listening to Dr. Ron Paul on the Cashflow Ninja podcast. We will be right back after a word from our sponsor. This is MC Laubscher, the host of the Cashflow Ninja podcast. As you may know, I'm also the president and chief wealth strategist of Valhalla Wealth Financial. We help individuals, families, small businesses, entrepreneurs, and professionals build their wealth outside of Wall Street and help investors maximize the use of every dollar in their personal economy and boost their investment gains. We do this by combining the capital and investments with the financial vehicle of the wealthy according to the infinite banking concept. If you're interested to learn more about privatized banking and the infinite banking concept, you can access an exclusive webinar at cashflowninja.com/be the bank. You're listening to Dr. Ron Paul on the Cashflow Ninja podcast, and now back to our interview. Looks like we've got a lot of people that are unhappy. The middle class, obviously, a lot of the people paying for this is very, very unhappy. And then also the poor, just through the inflation and the cost of rocketing is really unhappy too. And that's where a lot of revolution start is in the middle class.
That's why they are unhappy, because the middle class does get wiped out, which is something that Mises predicted. So that is where revolutions start when there's such a discrepancy in wealth distribution. Our enemies, our philosophic enemies, would say, see, the markets don't work. Free enterprise doesn't work. And they'll say that's why you have to have total socialism. But we don't have free markets. We don't have, free enterprise and sound money. So we should blame special interest government, which is cronyism and corporate welfareism. That's what we have. And that's one of our biggest obstacles, because people will use the argument and say, well, a free market, look at what it's done. And that's why government has to not back off. They have to do more and more and have a one party payer and this sort of thing. And people still believe, that there is something for nothing, and that we just take it from somebody else and give it to you, and the government can provide it for us, which is just a fallacy.
That's a perception too, especially with the millennials, where a lot of them are turned towards socialism, and it's a battle of ideas, because the misinformation is out there that it is capitalism that has failed, and as you eloquently pointed out, it hasn't really been given an opportunity yet. And you do share fantastic ideas on the Ron Paul Liberty Report that's on at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, streaming online with an audience that is also very, very young. So you're definitely pushing these ideas of liberty and what a free market is and what capitalism truly is.
Yeah, and a lot of people are discouraged because they see what's happening on the campuses and young people. They can get statistics to show a lot of them just reflect their professors. Oh, well, the government will take care of you. Socialized medicine is good. But there's a group now on campuses that I visit with, and they're not huge in numbers, but they're significant. And ideas don't have to be endorsed by everybody on campus. They just have to be endorsed by leaders. So that's where I'm encouraged, because if you take a group like Young Americans for Liberty and go to some of these campuses, there is a lot of support, and they're realizing that the system that they're inheriting isn't working. So I don't think the millennials who are demanding socialized medicine are the final answer. And I think that's our job in this business, is to show that those promises have always failed, and that there's something much better. We've had a taste of liberty in this country, and there's no reason why we can't, restore confidence in it and actually have a better system than ever before. Quite frankly, I come away from talking to these groups being more optimistic rather than pessimistic, and see the collapse and the falling apart of the system we have as an opportunity. because I think intellectually we're much further ahead than we were, say, when I made that decision back in the 70s and the 60s to get involved. I think philosophically, you know, we have the Mises Institute and the various organizations, and that means I think that we're making great progress. I just am always delighted to be on a program like yours, because you understand what's going on and you reach out and talking to people. This wasn't happening in the 1970s. It was just a few people that were the remnant that were hanging on to these ideas, and now I think they're blossoming right now and they're growing. And then people will say, well, look at Washington. It's a mess. You don't see any improvement. Don't look at Washington. Look outside of Washington. The views have to be changed outside of Washington. We have to ask the question what the role of government should be, and then we have to answer the question, and then we have to have influence on Washington. And I think one example I use, which I think is a good example, is we worked outside of Washington to get people interested in auditing the Fed. And when a vote came up, we could pass the vote, even though it was just in the House. But that came from the grassroots because they told their congressman what they wanted. And that's what has happened. I mean, the past has always been Keynesianism only. But now we're getting more people interested in sound economic policy. And that's the reason why we have to recognize that it's an ideological struggle. It's an idea that is very necessary. An idea as time has come, and really they can't stop us.
And you've touched on Austrian economics, which has played a very big role in your life. And I believe that you first came across it when you heard Ludwig von Mises speak at university.
Yes, I heard him. He was on his last lecture tour. Of course, I had read and heard about it, but that was very influential to be able to hear him give a lecture at the University of Houston. And that was pretty dramatic. But then over the years, you know, I got to meet and got to know people like Murray Rothbard and Hayek and Hans Sandholt. So it was very exciting to me. The person that probably helped me along the most was Leonard Read from the Foundation of Economic Education, because he, even in the 40s and the 50s, had an organization that held things together. And the educational challenges were much greater because here now we have the internet, and back then it was just a matter of finding out where this individual was and where the books were, and the Fee Foundation did that for us, and he introduced me to a lot of these ideas.
Dr. Paul, before the interview, we touched a little bit on principles and values, and you're an extremely principled man with a lot of courage. A lot of families that I see out there transfer wealth from one generation to the next generation, and it's squandered because they do not pass on those principles and values to the next generation to be not only stewards of that capital that's passed on to them, but to grow that wealth. If you could only pass on 3 principles and values to future generations to grow wealth and achieve happiness and success, what would they be?
Well, I think one of the most basic, and I consider it number one, and that is the principle of non-aggression, which fits into my personal religious beliefs that you don't commit aggression and do evil harm for your neighbors or friends or anybody, and that means you can't lie, cheat, or steal, or kill. And that's been around for a long, long time. But if you can pass those things on, the challenge now is not only should we all follow that and teach our kids about this, that we have to expand that understanding a little bit more to make people know that those rules have to apply to our government as well. So we teach our children about it and teach them proper understanding of moral principles, but they can be handicapped if the government is doing so much harm to us if they're doing things that you and I can't do. So if you and I can't steal from our neighbor, why is it that we've accepted this principle? And of course, Bastiat talks about this in the law. Why should we allow the government to do it for us? Why can they go into our neighbor's house and take stuff from them because we want something or we think we need it or they owe it to us, and use the government to do this? So taking this principle of no aggression against anybody personally, and that's a moral principle, and all the great religions have endorsed it, so you don't have to say, well, that's just one religion that believes that. and then apply this to government. And it's never been fully applied to any government. Governments tend to morph into something which is authoritarian and anti-liberty, and that's one of the things that we're suffering from now. So if we followed a few fundamental rules like that, we could take care of our personal affairs, because we could work hard and pass on, the capital that we have for our children to use. But if they have to understand the moral principles, then they would have to reject. Well, does that mean governments can't print money? Absolutely not. I mean, that's counterfeit. You can't counterfeit. Why should the government be allowed to counterfeit? So those moral principles are very well known. They're not looked at, but the biggest failure is not making the government, follow those same rules.
And contract law touches into that as well, of those basic rules to follow that would make an enormous difference.
That is right, and that's one of the reasons some of these more primitive societies, they might try a little bit about what we're talking about, but they don't understand contract, but they don't understand property. Contracts endorses the principle that property should be private, not owned by the government, and that makes all the difference in the world. When you look at our early foundation at Plymouth Colony, the governor, they tried to run the colony with socialism for 2 years, and they were starving to death and dying. And then the governor, Bradford, finally said, well, maybe we'll try private property. And it thrived. After that, it thrived. Private property and understanding and contracts, very, very important, and a moral principle that you do what you say and do what you promise. Otherwise, and, Adams told us, they said, we're giving you a republic, but it's not going to work if you don't have a moral people. If the people aren't moral, that won't work. And when I think of the chaos right now that we've been witnessing, and today we talked about it on my program, is the kind of things going on in Saudi Arabia. That has nothing, it doesn't relate to what we're doing at all. So I think the whole idea of the private property and contract is crucial, and both individuals and governments should follow those rules.
Dr. Paul, where can my listeners learn more about you? Where can they access the Ron Paul Liberty Report that's on at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time? And where can they connect with you?
Well, the Ron Paul Liberty Report is a good place to go to hear the programming, and that's on YouTube as well. But then the one foundation that I work with is ronpaul.org. Ron Paul Peace and Prosperity.org is the website to go to, the Institute for Peace and Prosperity. We do a lot of corresponding there, but believe me, it's very easy. Just Google my name and you'll find lots of opportunities, and we'd love to have you join us on our program every day.
Fantastic. Well, Dr. Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your journey and your knowledge and providing so much value for my listeners. This has been a fantastic experience connecting with you, and I look forward to our next conversation in the future.
Thank you. It's great being with you today.
Thank you for joining former Congressman and presidential candidate Dr. Ron Paul and myself on the Cashflow Ninja today. If you like what you hear and appreciate what we're trying to build here at the Cashflow Ninja, please subscribe, rate, and review our show on iTunes, and share our show with your family, friends, and your network. Thank you so much for spending your most valuable asset with me, your time. And if there's any way that I can provide more value for you and serve you better at the Cashflow Ninja, please reach out to me at info@cashflowninja.com. If you're not a subscriber to our newsletter or on our mailing list, you can sign up for our newsletter at cashflowninja.com or text Cashflow Ninja to 44222. Smart investors know that the banks actually don't own most automatic teller machines. In fact, the opportunity for private investment provides stellar passive returns, figures in the double digits, with the added bonus that most of the income is tax-free. Who wants to walk blindly past an ATM and not cash in on that opportunity? ATM machine ownership brings you a steady stream of hands-off passive income. Dave Zook and the Real Asset Investor team have been providing opportunities for investors in this uptrending activity of ATM use. If you're an accredited investor and would like more information on how you can invest in this exclusive asset class that very few investors will ever have access to, you can sign up for your free webinar on how to create income streams from ATMs at cashflowninja.com real asset investor. Jimmy Freeland and Bob Scott have been in your shoes and have used real estate investing to become financially free. They've designed a system to take any beginner to an experienced deal-making investor in the least amount of time. They offer opportunities from basic education, coaching, bridge loan investing to turnkey investments in the cash flowing market of St. Louis, Missouri. For more information, please visit joinopsproperties.com or call Jimmy and Bob at 314-799-2247. The wealthiest investors on the planet know how to capture their wealth and leverage it to perpetually grow it. If you're interested in learning the premier strategies of the wealthiest individuals and families on the planet, you can access your free webinar at cashflowninja.com/be the bank. That's our show for today, everyone. Until next time, live a life of passion and purpose on your terms. This presentation is for educational and informational purposes only. The information being presented and considered does not consider your particular financial objectives or situation, and it does not make personalized recommendations. This material is not intended to replace the advice of a qualified tax and legal advisor or other qualified professionals, and you should not use the information in place of a customized consultation with a licensed professional regarding your specific personal financial objectives, situation, and needs. We believe the information provided is reliable, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, timeliness, or completeness.